Every time I watch Iron-Blooded Orphans, I'm reminded of William Golding's Lord of the Flies. When the fat kid dies, the cast has reached the point of no return. Everything from then on out is doomed to fall apart, even if it takes a bit to fully sink in. Biscuit's death toward the end of IBO Season 1 sees Tekkadan lose sight of what it's fighting for. Instead of keeping to their more noble pursuits, they embrace revenge and set into motion events which sees the setting become a worse-off place. The brutality of Tekkadan's tactics, their efficiency, and who they furthered the aims of sees child soldiers become even more commonplace, as well as the rise of a would-be tyrant. After the cast loses their moral center, the one who questions whether or not they're doing the right thing, Tekkadan fully adopts a mentality which was previously held in check. From here on out, they would see their goals, whatever they may be, come to fruition by taking the shortest route possible. If Iron-Blooded Orphans had a single core idea, it would be this, and how ultimately wrong it is. IBO has a feel unlike any other Gundam series. So much so, it isn't all that uncommon for longtime fans to see it as its own thing, as a generic mecha anime with the Gundam name slapped onto it. Though I myself don't think this, it's hard to debate there isn't something to it. Iron-Blooded Orphans simply feels off. Doesn't quite feel like Gundam. However, I believe that's by design. It only feels that way because someone took great care to look at Gundam as a whole, understand what makes the franchise what it is, only to then do the opposite. At least, do the opposite come the series' end. Prior to Biscuit's death, IBO's first season is Gundam to a T. You have Tekkadan, forced into a fight they didn't ask for, trying to find their place in the world while protecting what little they have. They're your typical, albeit very offbeat, protagonists whose strength is each other, their bonds of brotherhood. You also have Kudelia, a girl trying to find a peaceful solution to a complex problem who Tekkadan is trying to protect. She's, again, your typical princess statesman character you'll find throughout the franchise. Together, this unlikely band sets off to change the world and avoid falling to their enemy's level. However, towards the end, they wind up doing precisely that, resulting in them achieving their goals, yet creating a new norm, which is arguably worse than what came before. Season 1, for the most part, doesn't rock the boat, do anything all that different prior to Biscuit's death, so it can establish a sense of normalcy within its audience. It sets up what's familiar, be it arcs, moments, or even themes we've seen before in other series, only to do the opposite of what's expected. The latter portion of Season 1 throws everything out of whack, makes it feel distinctly different so it can set up what's to come. Iron-Blooded Orphans' often maligned second season is, admittedly, very messy. There were too many ideas with not enough time to go around. It attempted to be a crime thriller, a political drama, as well as explore the Calamity War while still being a mecha anime. Though all these styles can and often do mesh well, they just didn't in this case. There were simply too many cooks in the kitchen. Having said that, I'd be hard-pressed to say IBO Season 2 is awful. In fact, I can't quite wrap my head around why this sentiment is as prevalent as it is. It certainly isn't as good as Season 1. It's not as concise, and the pacing feels rushed. However, I wouldn't claim it's bad. If anything, I'd say Season 2 is frustrating, especially on account of the antagonist's plot armor and how dumb Orga tends to come across. The fact Eok kept surviving crap which should have killed him, and how Tekkadan would seemingly blow it at the most crucial of moments, got annoying quick. It felt unfair and contrived, as if IBO had it out for its cast in a manner I can only describe as unnatural. What was unfolding didn't feel like the finale of Zeta, for instance, where things got out of hand for logical reasons. Instead, we get all this setup for a grand heroic moment, a triumphant payoff, the likes of which we saw in Season 1, only to watch as the cast fails kind of out of the blue. The show seemingly sabotaged instances which would normally be hype as hell, and instead made them bitter to sit through. It's odd, and again immensely frustrating, However, after giving it some thought, I'm fairly certain that's the point. With the exception of certain aspects of After War X and possibly even Turn A, Iron-Blooded Orphans is one of the most internally referential series in all of Gundam. If this is your first experience with the franchise, you're missing out on a lot of what IBO has to offer, be it McGillis and Galio, how they mirror then twist Char's relationship with Garma, or Masahiro's comments about reincarnation and the afterlife. Something which hits different after watching Char's counterattack, Unicorn, and especially NT. In a vacuum, as a self-contained series, what Iron-Blooded Orphans does is unsatisfying writing, plain and simple. When our heroes fail, we tend to want proper build-up for said failure. We want to see how it happened and feel depressed at their loss, as opposed to feeling deflated. Sudden, shocking deaths aside, which is another matter entirely, something IBO does well even in a vacuum, watching the cast set something up, only to, at the last minute, fail out of the blue, just sucks. Feels contrived and often takes people out of the experience. I bring this up because Iron-Blooded Orphans does not exist in a vacuum. It's a Gundam series, even if it doesn't always feel like one. In the world of media and literature analysis, the word intertextuality has a tendency to get thrown around. What this refers to is the relationship between texts, pieces of media, and how they may be interconnected. Basically, it's a big fancy word that refers to how one work can influence another, provide new context for what you're engaging with. When you keep in mind Gundam as a whole while taking a look at Iron-Blooded Orphans, you get a unique experience with the latter parts of Season 2 instead of an unsatisfying one. Once you realize time and again it's the heroes who narrowly land that final shot, or prevent their enemy from doing so, the series' back half begins to click. Think about what Tekkadan is doing amidst the final few episodes prior to the finale, and why they're doing it. Now, compare that to how they were for most of Season 1. Do you see any differences? Come Season 2, at least this point in Season 2, Tekkadan are the villains. They may be our protagonists, who we follow, but they're unquestionably in the wrong. Unlike before, when they were protecting Kudelia and trying to bring about peaceful change, Tekkadan has sided with a power-hungry tyrant in a bid to become the Kings of Mars. They're imposing their will, or rather McGillis's will, by force, taking the shortest path to their goal, and have become the very thing they fought against during Season 1. They aren't fighting to protect one another or their fellow man, but to conquer and take something which isn't theirs. Unlike before, Tekkadan wasn't backed into a corner and forced to fight. They lost sight of what they set out to originally do. The reason Rustal, Iok, Vidar, and Julieta have plot armor is because, come this change, they are now IBO's heroes. Their perceived plot armor is less a contrivance and rather a result of Iron-Blooded Orphans' unique framing. Since we're still following Tekkadan, the villains, we don't have the proper context to make these types of saves compelling. The focus isn't on the Galahorn cast, so we're missing out on the build-up that would make these moments hype, as opposed to contrived. Though we get insight into Julieta, Vidar, and the rest, we're still missing out on how they develop as people over the course of the season. We're getting cutaways, similar to how Zeta would dedicate some time to Jared, instead of something more proper like what happens with Camille. We're essentially watching, from Jared's perspective, him line up a shot on the Argama's bridge and miss because Camille came to the rescue at the last minute. We're missing out on how this one instance marks a point of growth for Camille, him becoming more responsible and other such Zeta things, thus instilling into us a sense of unfair annoyance, which Jared would have no doubt felt. In Iron-Blooded Orphans, those in Tekkadan are still our protagonists, who we're focusing on, whereas Galahorn are our antagonists. However, their positions as hero and villain have flipped on account of their changing morals. We're seeing Gundam from a unique perspective, watching conventions play out from the receiving end and are feeling the repercussions as the villains would. We understand the sorrow Jared must have felt after losing another lover, the rage that followed, since the same thing happens to IBO's cast. This isn't to say Rustal, Eok, Vidar, and Julieta are good people. Jesus Christ, that is not what I'm saying. Merely that they just so happen to be better come the series' latter half. Rustal is in store for a reckoning, if the last parts with Ride are any indicator. But that's a different topic entirely. Post-Disaster has a ton of room for a sequel. Be it by accident or on purpose, Iron-Blooded Orphans takes what longtime fans know about Gundam and flips it on its head. It isn't a deconstruction or subversion, since everything the franchise is known for is still there, unscathed. However, it's shown in a different light. Again, at least at the end. IBO's more traditional first season and unique second puts the series into a rather interesting position. This might sound a bit crazy, but the series' unique structure serves as one of the best explanations out there for what Gundam as a franchise is all about. The first season, through its characters and story, sets up what a lot of core ideas are, whereas the second shines a light on what they're not. Perhaps the best example of what I'm getting at is the Gundam frames themselves, since this series in particular puts a lot of emphasis upon what these machines mean to the populace at large. From a design perspective, the Gundams are great. I love IBO's concept of the mobile suit frame, since it explains away why some machines look radically different from one another, despite being the same model. The concept also does wonders for the story at large. Most Mobile Suit frames, save for the Greys and some of its precursors, are salvaged technology from the Calamity War. They stem from an age which has essentially passed into myth. They have an air of mystique around them, a reverence for which the Gundams are the pinnacle of. This immediately makes the Gundams important to those within the setting. However, few fully understand why. The relics that brought about an end to the Calamity War, machines which appear amidst critical points in history, but that's about it. A legend surrounds these mobile suits, one which mirrors alternate universes, but it's precisely that. A legend. Something which has a tendency to be misunderstood. Outside of just being an interesting take on a Char clone, McGillis is someone who fundamentally doesn't understand what a Gundam is, or what it often means across most series. He's obsessed with the machine's legend, its power and ability to defeat anything which gets in its way. Not so much what it accomplished in the past. As Rustal points out toward the end of Season 2, there's a difference between legend and history. One focuses on reputation, where the other emphasizes deeds. As far as Gundam as a whole is concerned, the latter, and not the former, is what's important. The first season of IBO highlights this the best. By protecting one who is trying to bring about peaceful change, Tekkadan are viewed as heroic knights. They instill hope into the downtrodden and abused, are an extension of what Kudelia represents to those she's trying to save. Though the pilots themselves may not be the best of people, their actions resonate with those they come across, be it when they take a stand or a step back. Come Season 2, however, the Gundams, save for the one Galio pilots, mean nothing. In fact, they take on a negative connotation, are demons by the end, because the cause they fought for was a selfish, borderline evil one. Tekkadan is trying to bend others to their will, conquer and take what isn't their own. Their actions, instead of being something to rally behind, are that of what they once stood against. What makes a Gundam special isn't its power, but rather the meaning behind it, their deeds. The ones that are remembered are agents of positive change, of hope. The ones that are forgotten, however, are often that of fear. This is something which is echoed across every Gundam series, though some do this better than others. The Mark II and Exia, for instance, those machines are remembered by those in the setting, whereas the Psycho and Thrones are not. This idea extends beyond the Gundams themselves and is a driving force behind Iron-Blooded Orphans' second season. In fact, Season 2 of IBO might be the best explanation for what makes a hero in Gundam. I don't know how controversial an opinion this is, but I've come to view Orga, not Mikazuki or Kudelia, as IBO's main character. My reason for this is him being the one who drives things forward. His growth directly affects the course of the series. While watching Season 2, I noticed something I missed when the show originally aired. Perks of binging, I guess. That being Orga's jacket. Pay attention to it. IBO makes a point of characters handing Orga his old Tekiden jacket, something he no longer wears in favor of a business suit at various points throughout the series. When this happens, Tekiden is back on the right track. They're veering off the path, albeit briefly, that leads to their downfall. When Orga is wearing that jacket, he's going up against the mobile armor, protecting the world he calls home, and trying to save his family from a mistake he himself made. Constantly, IBO lampshades this fact, with the most prominent example occurring the episode before Orga's death, when the others comment that he's back to his old self. A while back, I mentioned my own frustrations pertaining to Orga, how idiotic he comes across during Season 2. The guy had everything he wanted by the end of Season 1. Tekiden found the place they belonged, it's said so outright, yet for Orga it isn't enough. He allies with someone he shouldn't, lets his ambition get the better of him, and makes a series of terrible decisions. Constantly throughout the season, numerous characters state what he's doing is not just stupid, but dangerous. How he should dial things back and take the proper steps to reach his goal instead of the shortest route possible. Throughout the season, Orga is warned that what he's about to do will end in disaster, yet he goes through with it regardless. At any point, he could have backed out, prevented Tekiden's demise, which is the entire point. How other characters respond to Orga indicates which path he should be following. What separates the heroes in Gundam from the villains. When he's protecting his family, responding to a fight he can't back down from, Orga is in the right and rewarded. Tekiden grows and becomes prosperous from this line of thinking, even if it slipped up come the end of Season 1. When he's acting on his own ambition, however, starting a fight which didn't need to happen, he's in the wrong and punished severely. When Mikazuki gives up on his dream to run a farm, submit himself to a life of fighting to keep Orgas alive, it's made abundantly clear how wrong the choice made ultimately is. These aren't conclusions Gundam's heroes come to. Something went wrong, and we as the audience know full well what. What IBO highlights through Orga and several other characters is the difference between when its heroes fight and that of its villains. Explores how hard it can be to discern the line between the two. Neither McGillis nor Orga did what they would ultimately do for a purely selfish reason. McGillis believed his ideals would see the world enter a new age, whereas Orga wanted to ensure his family was taken care of. On the surface, these are goals one could easily get behind. However, the problem stems from their execution. Unlike Kudelia in Season 1, whose back was against the wall with no other options but to fight, McGillis and Orga had the ability to reach their goals without bloodshed. If they didn't try to take the shortest route possible, went through the proper steps and tried to bring about peaceful change, even if that failed, then they'd have still maintained their place as IBO's heroes. Well, Orga would have maintained his place. Kinda hard to consider McGillis' "I've betrayed everyone in my life" Farid a good guy. Orga's journey, and the narrative arc presented between Seasons 1 and 2, put on display a trend common in most AU series, but does it in reverse. Traditionally, be it Gundam Wing, 00, or other entries which have a similar format, the first half of the series is dedicated to the cast trying to impose their will by force, pick a fight which didn't have to happen, and getting brutally punished for it. The Wing Boys make the already tense political situation worse, leading to all-out war. and celestial being unintentionally gives rise to the Innovades, to A-Laws. Generally speaking, after realizing they messed up, the cast of these series grow and adopt a new line of thinking. They come to understand that taking the shortest route possible, using violence to get your way, just makes everything worse. That conflict should be the last resort, a resort they must now employ because the foe before them is much like how they used to be. Words are useless because the enemy refuses to listen. This basic idea is present in IBO. However, Tekkadan sits in the position the cast of these other series are in during their second half, while in their first season, whereas the second season sees them doing what those characters did amidst their first half. They know, or are rather, doing the right thing when the series starts, only to wind up doing the opposite come its end. This leads to disastrous repercussions, the deaths of characters the audience had grown to love, and drives the point home, through the unique perspective of failure instead of triumph, that violence should be the last resort, not the first. Like within the series itself, Tekkadan are made an example of. They're a warning for what one shouldn't become, instead of something to strive toward like in other series. If you've ever wondered why I get annoyed with Seed, and not Wing or Double O, it's for this reason in particular. Wing and Double O portrays the cast's earlier behavior in a negative light and punishes them for it. Characters die, they lose and make the world a worse off place. The survivors are forced to reflect, realize they were wrong and change for the better. They come to a new understanding and rise to the occasion to clean up the mess they created. In Seed, no one is punished, even when they do utterly absurd things like in Destiny, and in fact are vindicated. They just so happen to be in the right because the villains aren't people, they're cartoon characters with doomsday-level machinations. No one changes, no one reflects. The notion of taking the shortest route possible isn't challenged. If the Archangel contacted the Minerva to figure out what was going on, done anything other than seek out fights and blow away those who stood against them, so much could have played out differently. But I digress. IBO feels radically different from other entries because it's showing the audience what makes Gundam, Gundam from a perspective we haven't really seen before. Season 1 sets up what Gundam is traditionally like, only for Season 2 to explain more in detail by showing us what it isn't. It has us follow the villains, those who were once our heroes, and depicts them walking a path which the show makes abundantly clear is wrong. Tekkadan are still our protagonists. We understand the motivation for them doing what they're doing, empathize with them as human beings, which makes the fact they didn't turn away from their mistake when they could have all the more painful. The audience sees the writing on the wall. IBO's message that taking the shortest route possible to one's goal isn't something which should be done. That lasting, positive change can only be brought about by taking your time and doing things the right way. However, unlike other series which depicts triumph in taking this idea to heart, it demonstrates crushing failure when it's ignored. IBO is a good series, not faultless by any means, but an entertaining ride regardless. It wasn't afraid to experiment, try new things, and show off old ideas in a unique light. It's an odd beast which doesn't feel like Gundam more often than not, yet wouldn't work as well as I think it does without the context other series provide. If you have the time, I recommend you give it a watch or even rewatch if you have yet to do so. There was a lot I missed my first time around, since I started Gundam with IBO and had fun picking up on it. Hush might be the closest we've ever gotten to a Jared clone. His scenes are just so bizarre, with a lot of weighty monologues that amount to nothing. Reminds me of how irrelevant Jared becomes during the last few episodes of Zeta, as if both characters are a punchline to a twisted joke. But with that said, I've been Boo. I'll see all you guys next time. Tell me what you thought in the comments down below. I'll see you all later. Goodbye.